Hello, my name is Randy Reed. I'm the publisher and editor of the Edison Report, a sponsor of the National Lighting Bureau's annual Lighting Forum. We're here at the studios of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, where I'm serving as a moderator of 5 panel discussions. This one is titled Outdoor Lighting and the American Medical Association. This panel will focus on warnings the AMA has issued about certain forms of outdoor lighting provided by LED light sources. The panelists are Mark Lien with the Illuminating Engineering Society and Terry McGowan of the International Dark Sky Association. Gentlemen, welcome.
Thank you.
Now, Mark, this letter from the AMA, this blue light letter, came out in June, and I attended the IES annual conference in Orlando, hoping to learn about the IES's response to this letter that has so affected our industry. I sat in at the board meeting and I heard a discussion about the letter, and the discussion ended up by saying, and we'll have further discussions in February at the next board meeting. I'm kind of waiting to hear in action. When will IES have a response?
Sure. And I get that question often. I was in the office when the report was released in June, and we all read it together. And our immediate response to that was, there's a lot here that we need to deal with quickly. And I think a lot of our members would have appreciated a quick confrontational reaction, but that long-term won't serve us. So as we considered our options, we did release an initial statement saying that there were some omissions and we had some concerns. But as we considered our options long-term, we think it's in our best interest to work with the AMA, not to be confrontational with them, and to work with them on further iterations of reports on light and health in a much broader perspective. They need the help of architectural lighting professionals. That isn't their area of expertise, and I think that was conspicuous in the last report.
Is there a time frame?
Well, we are actually in contact with them now.
Okay.
So it's ongoing and has been. So I'm encouraged that we'll see some new information come out from them in their next release. When that is their schedule, not ours.
Sure.
But I believe we'll be significantly more involved.
So Terry, what were some of the issues that you saw with the AMA letter?
Well, I'm with the International Dark Sky Association here today on the panel, but I'm also a lighting designer. And really this goes to a much broader question, and that question has to do with the amount of blue light being emitted by LED lighting systems today. And so we're interested in what that blue light does. From an astronomical standpoint, blue light is harmful because it scatters in the atmosphere and makes observations harder to do. It puts a fog between the telescope and the sky, for example. From the AMA standpoint, what the blue light does is it affects the circadian rhythms of people. And so the AMA is responding to health concerns that are the result of potential interruption of circadian rhythms.
Okay. And Mark, if you look at the way they did their research with the rats and everything, do you think it was good science?
The AMA did a report back in 2012 on outdoor lighting and health. And it was a 25-page report, and it had 137 references. And it was very detailed, and the IES in large part was supportive and was quite involved with that report. We had a number of IES members that, to help craft it. It was good science. The latest report is only 8 pages, and it had a fraction of the references, and we had some concerns that it really omitted many things. So in terms of good science, I think our agreement, our point of agreement here with the AMA and certainly with the IDA and with Terry is that we want science to drive the light and health issue. And we are all concerned with health and how light impacts our physiology. What they omitted in the AMA report, to their detriment, is they did focus on spectral content, but they didn't talk about the amount of light, which I'm sure we'll discuss in this panel, and they didn't talk about the length of exposure. They also didn't talk about safety issues.
Right.
And so those omissions, I think, make it not a holistic argument at all. And even, and Terry and I can further discuss this, even the spectral content issue, which is an aspect of light and health, they're using CCT as a metric for that, correlated color temperature. And correlated color temperature doesn't give us an indication of melanoptic content. And that's really what affects the circadian rhythm. And Terry, I think we're in agreement on that.
Yeah, yes, we are. CCT, chromaticity, usually expressed in degrees Kelvin, like 3,000 kelvins, is not a very good metric for relating how much blue light there is in a light source. In fact, we have lots of light sources, LED light sources, in fact, that, let's say they're all 3,000 K, they can have varying amounts of blue light, and the variations are substantial. It's 10, 15, 20%, according to a chart published recently by the DOE. So one of the main problems with the AMA report is the fact that it does use chromaticity as a blue light metric when it is not.
Okay, did the report cite any real-world instances of harm being caused to people by lighting?
Well, I can answer that, and yes, there are plenty of those. We know light can act on human beings from a light and health standpoint. We've got lots of research now, and in fact, there was one report very early on, this goes back to 2003, 2002, that shows how much we know about light and health. We've been studying this now from a research standpoint since the beginning of the century, and even a little bit before that. So there's lots of information, there's lots of research. But what we have trouble with is the dose. You know, if you consider light is some kind of a drug, dose is important, and dose has to do with the amount of light, when that dose is given, how long that dose is, how the person receives it, whether their eyes are closed or open, for example, makes a big difference. Right. And so all of these variables have to be taken into account. You can't simplify that and say, just because it's a blue light, it's harmful. You've got to know how that blue light impinges upon the person and affects that person.
And it's very application specific.
Yes.
There will be applications where a warm color temperature light is very appropriate, certainly around observatories for the reasons that you mentioned with blue scatter. There are variables in exposure that I think are going to have a significant impact on people's health. There are people who are just driving to or from one location in the evening. So outdoor lighting, for them, very limited exposure. But there are policemen, firemen, emergency crews, and night shift workers that are working outside that would have much more exposure, and that's where the dosing is going to be particularly important. So those are two significant variables. And it's interesting that it's focused on outdoor lighting, where the light levels tend to be very low. Right. So we're dealing with light levels often in the half a foot candle to foot candle range outside, but at night, people spend time in their homes under maybe 50-foot candles in their kitchen, 20-foot candles in their living room.
Much higher.
In malls. I mean, the reason that we have light at night is because it extends our daylight hours. I mean, sunset, you know, is not the time that we stop living, right? We go to sporting events in the evening, we go shopping in the evening, we go to hospitals in the evening, and all of those interior environments have substantially more melanoptic content from the intensity of blue light. Exterior is really a very small portion of it. Again, unless you're working in that outside environment throughout the entire evening. So I think it's very important that that get factored into the AMA's judgment.
We have seen, when the report was issued, we have seen cities, some have just stopped their relighting program. Others have moved to a 3000K. Do we see cities such as early adopters, maybe such as the city of LA, switching from 6,000 to 3,000?
There have been cities that have done that, and there have been lawsuits as a result of the AMA report and that particular recommendation that 3,000 Kelvin be encouraged for outdoor lighting. And that recommendation is really where we have the greatest issue, because again, as both Terry and I have mentioned, 3,000 Kelvin, that correlated color temperature, really isn't indicative of the melanoptic content, which is having the effect on our physiology. So I would say that those cities that have switched, they think they're playing it safe by doing that. And there are people who are reacting to this 3000K suggestion and believe it's going to be healthier. There's no data to substantiate that. The metric is flawed. So whether it'll be healthier or not, there are some other considerations. One prominent lighting designer said to me that he has all of his clients now using 3000 Kelvin, and he tells them that's the lowest risk because of the AMA report. But in fact, we have data that shows that 4100 Kelvin provides, on roadway lighting, up to a 20% greater visual acuity than 3000 Kelvin. If that's the case, you may be putting yourself at greater risk by going to 3000 Kelvin.
So they put in the 6,000, then they're going to move to the 3,000, then 2 years later they'll come back to 4,100. What a mess.
What a mess. So it's going to take, and this is, you know, it's where we're at in the industry right now, that light and health hasn't been a serious enough focus. Terry showed a report from 2002 when we got together to talk about light and health. And Terry and I have both spoken at photobiology conferences together. But those stopped. They came to almost a screeching halt with the energy crisis. And our priorities shifted to energy efficiency in the lighting industry. And we took our eye off light and health. So I see now with the energy efficiency issues, we've achieved, you know, great energy gains. Now we're going to be looking at other aspects. Light and health is one of them.
Would you say the industry was caught by surprise with the AMA letter?
Yes, I would. We weren't involved with the AMA report, and when it was released, I don't know of anyone in the lighting industry that saw it coming.
Terry, how have the manufacturers responded?
Well, I think the manufacturers are hard put. Their focus has been, as Mark just suggested, on efficacy. When DOE and others put together the LED lighting program and research program that they have done so well, the focus shifted from the traditional kinds of thinking about roadway lighting particularly, and began to shift toward efficiency. And so everything was done, the design of the fixture, the design of the LED, the design of the lighting system, to maximize energy efficiency. And we forgot a couple of very important things. One is that lighting is for people. Energy efficiency is important, but it's not at the top of the list always. And you have to take into account glare, light distribution, the color of the light, the application, which is most important, because street lighting is not just for cars, it's for people. And so all of these lighting quality factors, the things that go to make lighting acceptable and suitable for people, and they're paying for it, were forgotten. And the focus was put on energy. And the manufacturers, yeah, I can understand those pressures, but I also know that those responsible for lighting design were kind of lost in the background, because it was automatically the most efficient system wins. So it needs to be changed. Some of these systems do need to be changed if for the glare characteristics alone, because they're terrible.
Yeah.
But we can't do that without the manufacturers developing lower glare devices and options that give us a chance to change the color or to select a better color that's appropriate for a neighborhood or an application, or for an astronomical observatory that happens to be one of those neighbors
Right.
that has to use
Okay.
the sky. So these systems are more complex than they appear. It isn't a simple solution of use a 3000 K light source. It's more complicated than that, and it has to be to take into account everything we know about lighting.
So color tunability would be the solution?
Well, it's certainly going to help. It won't help with glare necessarily, but it certainly would help with the kind of light source that people prefer for the application, sidewalks, for example, compared to streets. And it would also help because it would give you some way to vary the lighting over time. There are maybe times of the year when you would want a cooler or warmer tone to the light source.
So Mark, let's just say the year's 2025 and you're retired and you're living on some island off of your great retirement from the IES.
Thank you for that.
And you're going to help that island design their lighting in the year 2025. Any idea what you'd be putting in or recommending?
In 2025, well, it would be a light source that would have adjustable color temperatures and intensity. That would be critical. Probably have sensing devices in it as well that would turn the lights on and off based on motion in the space, so that lights were only on or on at a full level when there were people there to use them. Optical design would be such that the lighting contribution from these fixtures didn't go into people's homes. Okay? I think that's critical, and that's achievable now. All of those things are achievable now. Cost, of course, is a driving factor, but certainly the optical control that Terry mentioned is something that we could do now, and we still want to do in 2025.
With the driverless cars coming, does that change anything?
Well, again, lighting is for people. So even with driverless cars, you do have people interacting with traffic. You do have
Okay.
pedestrians. You do have school children crossing the street. So I don't think that means street lighting is going to disappear. I think it's going to change. And certainly having the ability, which you do with LED street lighting, to dim it, to change the color, and maybe even change the distribution. We may want to consider those variables in the designing of the street lighting of the future. I think also, again, from the astronomy standpoint, this absolutely has to be done, and we can do that today, as Mark said. We have to be able to put light where we want it. We can't just simply let light go up into the sky and expect it to do any good up there. It's not doing any good. It's only doing harm to both astronomical observations as well as the environment, because we know not just people are affected by light at night. We know that plants and animals of all kinds are affected by light at night, and we have to minimize that light into the environment. Let the natural light, the moon and the sun and so forth, rule the day and rule the night as well.
Closing comment?
Well, there was when we talk about blue light, the one thing that has happened as a result of the AMA report is it's elevated the level of conversation, as it should.
Okay.
And the concern about blue light really stems from the discovery of a new photoreceptor in the eye, the IPRGC, right, the intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cell, which isn't there primarily for vision. It works with our circadian system. So blue light has become much more important, but I think what people need to consider is the amount of light and how they're exposing them to it in the evening, because that's what's going to have the effect on the melatonin. So there are reports out on tablets, using tablets and television sets that have a very high melanoptic content in the evening before you go to bed, and recommendations even from the AMA that you should turn those off at least an hour before you go to bed. That is going to have a much more significant impact than outdoor lighting. And I think those types of holistic considerations have to be considered rather than just focusing on one small aspect of how blue light impacts our health.
Terry?
I think that's a good summary, because there's more than one way that people get blue light in the evening when they should be reducing the amount of blue light or light in general. And the nature of the human being is to tend to stay up late these days because there's so much to do, so much to see, so much interaction and from a social standpoint, But if light is a drug, we've got to use that drug wisely and not use it when it shouldn't be used and in quantities that it shouldn't be used in. So everything from the TV set, as Mark said, to the pad, to the iPhones and other electronic devices do make a contribution to that. And in relationship to outdoor lighting coming through a window, they're usually much more powerful. So we have to put that in perspective.
Okay.
Hey,
Please.
Terry, you and I were discussing how does a user determine the melanoptic content of their sources?
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought that up, because for the first time now we've got some metrics that actually can give us an indication that can be measured with a type of light meter, so that we know how much melanopic light is we're being exposed to, either at the eye or any other part of the body for that matter. And so I'm very optimistic that as we use these models now, and all these models require is a spectral distribution of the light source, we can figure out how much light we're actually being exposed to, how much of that light is going into our eye, and therefore get an indication numerically as to what effect it's going to have. So that's a step forward, and I appreciate the development of these models, because that's going to give us a lot better information than we have now.
Yeah, right now it's so vague. People
Yes.
are using the term blue,
Yeah.
as it was in the AMA report.
Yeah.
They referred to blue or blue-rich light 23 times, but they never defined what it is.
Yeah, and there's certain parts of that blue spectrum that are more powerful as far as human beings are concerned than others.
480 nanometers, that's
Right.
the key. So,
Okay. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much. I think there's still a whole lot more to come on this subject, but we appreciate you taking the time to inform our audience.
thank you, Randy.
Thank you, Randy.